Captain Jiwan stared at the message screen in her command center. The words glowed bright blue against the dark metal walls of the space station. She read them 3 times, but they did not change. Humanity's application for advanced technology. Sharing has been permanently denied. Further contact is unnecessary. The message came from the Galactic Council. For 300 years, humans had tried to prove they belonged among the stars. They had followed every rule. They had paid every tax. They had sent their best people to serve on alien worlds. And now this. Jiwan touched the communication panel. "Get me Commander Minho at Deep Space Station 7. The screen flickered. Minho's tired face appeared. Dark circles ringed his eyes. He had not slept in days. "Captain, we have a problem," Minho said before she could speak. "A big one." "The council message?" "No. Something worse." Minho turned to look at something off-screen. "I'm sending you the sensor data now." Numbers and pictures filled Jiwan's screen. Ship movements, fleet positions, energy readings. Her heart grew cold as she understood what she was seeing. "Every major race is moving their fleets," she whispered. "All of them," Minho confirmed. "The crystal people, the hive minds, the old ones who claim they built the first stars. They're all running." Jiwan studied the data. The Veltar had pulled their crystal ships from 12 systems. The Nexari hive fleets were fleeing toward the galaxy's center. The ancient Corvani, who never moved their world ships except for the most important reasons, were abandoning entire sectors. Running from what? Minho's face grew pale. "Something big is coming from outside our galaxy. The long-range sensors picked it up 2 days ago. I've never seen readings like this." The data showed a dark mass moving between the stars. It was huge, bigger than anything that should exist. And it was heading straight for the outer edge of the galaxy, where most human colonies sat. "How long do we have?" 18 months. Maybe less. Jiwan closed her eyes. She thought about the human colonies scattered across 47 star systems. Mining worlds where families had lived for generations. Research stations where scientists studied the mysteries of space. Trading posts where humans and aliens had worked side by side. "The Council knew about this," she said. "Yes. They knew when they sent that message. Yes." The truth hit her like a physical blow. The advanced races were not just denying humans their technology. They were cutting all contact before running away. They were leaving humanity to face whatever was coming alone. "Captain, there's more," Minho said. "I intercepted some encrypted transmissions between the fleeing fleets. They're calling it the Devourer. They say it eats planets, eats stars, eats the thoughts right out of living minds." Jiwan opened her eyes. Through the station's windows, she could see the blue and green world of Kepler 442b turning slowly below. 2 million humans lived on that planet. They grew food in vast farms. They raised children who had never seen Earth. They built homes under alien suns and called those places their own. "Any word from Earth?" "The government is calling emergency sessions. But Captain, the math is simple. We have maybe 300 real warships. The aliens had thousands, and they're running scared." Jiwan understood what he was not saying. Humanity had always been the weakest member of the galactic community. Their ships were slow and basic compared to alien technology. Their weapons were simple kinetic launchers and fusion warheads. The advanced races had energy shields, reality-bending drives, and weapons that could crack planets. If those powerful civilizations were fleeing, what chance did humans have? "Keep monitoring everything," she ordered. "Send all data to Colonial Command." "And Minho?" Yes, Captain. Start sending messages to all the outer colonies. Tell them what's coming. They deserve to know. After the call ended, Ji-Wan sat alone in her command center. The station hummed quietly around her. Outside, the stars looked peaceful and bright. It was hard to believe that something terrible was moving through that darkness. She thought about her daughter on Earth. So-Young was serving on a Navy destroyer now, protecting the inner systems. At least she would be safe when the end came. The core worlds had better defenses and more warning time. But what about the colonists who had no ships to carry them away? What about the miners on asteroid stations? What about the research teams, studying alien ruins on distant worlds? Her communication system chimed. Another message had arrived. This one came from Dr. Soman at Research Station Prometheus. Captain, we've detected massive evacuation movements in the Triangulum sector. The Veltar are abandoning their trade cities. They left so fast that some of their buildings are still powered up. We're also picking up distress signals from civilian transports. Aliens from dozens of species are stranded without evacuation ships. So it was starting already. The advanced races were saving themselves and leaving everyone else behind. Ji-Wan opened a channel to the research station. Dr. Somin, gather any alien refugees you can find. Bring them to human space. Captain, we don't have authority to... We have the authority of basic decency. If our so-called allies won't save them, we will. Over the next few hours, more reports came in. Captain Hyun-woo, flying cargo runs in the outer systems, found empty alien cities. Lieutenant Nari discovered that the Crystal people had not just evacuated their worlds, but had activated defense systems to keep anyone else from using their technology. The message was clear. The advanced races were willing to let everyone else die to buy themselves time to escape. As night fell on Kepler 442b below, Ji-Wan made a decision that would change everything. She opened a priority channel to every human ship, station, and colony in the outer systems. This is Captain Ji-Wan of Terran Colonial Command. You've all heard the reports by now. A terrible enemy is coming from beyond our galaxy. The advanced races who called themselves our allies have abandoned us. They expect us to die alone in the dark while they retreat to safety. I won't lie to you. What's coming is beyond anything we've ever faced. Our chances of survival are small. But we are human. We've never been good at accepting defeat. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We've reached for the stars when wiser species told us to stay on our home world. If this is where we make our stand, then we'll make it count. Send word to every colony, every station, every ship. Tell them it's time to come home. We're going. To show this galaxy what humans do when their backs are against the wall. We're going to fight. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Ji-Wan could hear her heart beating. She had just committed humanity to a war they could not win against an enemy they did not understand. But looking out at the stars, she felt something she had not expected. She felt proud. Dr. Somin walked through the empty crystal city of Veltar Prime. Her boots echoed in the silence. The crystal beings had built their city from living light, but now the towers were dark and cold. They had left everything behind in their rush to escape. Her research team followed behind her, scanning the abandoned buildings with their instruments. The readings were strange. The Veltar had not just evacuated. They had wiped their computers and destroyed anything that might help others understand their technology. They knew exactly what was coming, said her assistant, a young man named Kangmin. These evacuation plans are too detailed to have been made in a hurry. Soman nodded. She picked up a crystal data pad from the ground. The screen was cracked, but still working. Alien symbols scrolled across it too fast to read. Can you translate any of this? Kang Min connected his scanner to the device. After a few minutes, he looked up with a pale face. It's a report about something called the Devourer. It says they don't just destroy planets. They consume the quantum patterns that make up consciousness itself. Soman felt cold despite her heated suit. They eat minds? More than that. They make it so those minds never existed at all. No afterlife, no memory, just nothing. She understood now why the advanced races were running. This was not just death. This was complete erasure from reality itself. Her radio crackled. Dr. Salmon, we're getting a distress call from the outer edge of the system. Multiple ships requesting assistance. On our way. They found the refugee ships clustered around an old gas mining station. Dozens of vessels from different species floated in space, their hulls scarred and their engines failing. These were not military ships or government vessels. These were civilian craft, family transports, small traders, research vessels. This is Dr. Salmon of the Human Research Station Prometheus. Do you need assistance? The replies came in a dozen different languages, but the translation systems worked well enough. The story was always the same. Their governments had issued evacuation orders for essential personnel only. Everyone else was left behind to slow the enemy advance. My children are on that transport, came one voice, speaking broken human language. My government said there was no room for families of low-ranking citizens. Another voice, this one bitter with anger. They took the military and the scientists and the rich. They left the workers and the old ones and anyone who couldn't pay for passage. Soman made a decision that went against every regulation in the book. All refugee ships, follow us to human space. We'll find room for everyone. While Dr. Soman was rescuing refugees, Captain Hyunwoo was discovering how far the abandonment reached. His cargo ship normally carried supplies between human colonies, but now he was exploring empty alien worlds. On Nexari Hive World 7, he found cities that looked like giant anthills, but no sound came from inside. The hive minds had withdrawn into their core worlds, leaving behind millions of worker drones who could not survive without their mental connection to the hive queens. They just left them to die, said his co-pilot Young-ho. Their own people, Hyunwoo, watched the worker drones wandering aimlessly through their empty cities. Without the hive mind to guide them, they moved like sleepwalkers. In a few days, they would lie down and never get up again. Load as many as we can fit, he ordered. Human doctors might be able to help them. Captain, they're not human. We don't even know if they can survive in human space. They deserve the chance to try. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Nari was leading a military reconnaissance mission to the abandoned trade hub of Kristallos Prime. The planet had been one of the most important commercial centers in the outer galaxy. Now it was a ghost world, but the orbital, defense platforms were still active. As soon as Nari's scout ship approached, warning signals lit up her console. This is an automated defense system, came a recorded message in the crystal language. This facility is sealed by order of the Veltar High Council. Any attempt to access Veltar technology will be met with lethal force. Nari's sensor officer, a young woman named Ji Hyun, studied the readings. They're not protecting the planet from the Devourers. They're protecting their technology from us. They'd rather see their weapons destroyed than let humans use them to fight. Looks that way. Nari felt anger growing in her chest. The Crystal people had been happy to trade with humans when it profited them. They had sold basic goods and simple technology in exchange for human raw materials and labor. But now, when humanity needed help to survive, they sealed away anything that might be useful. Take us to the next system, she ordered. I want to know if this is happening everywhere. It was. On world after world, the pattern was the same. The advanced races had evacuated their essential personnel and destroyed anything that might help the people they left behind. They had calculated that the outer rim colonies would serve as a buffer zone, slowing the devourer advance while the core worlds prepared their defenses. Dr. Somin returned to her research station with 47 refugee ships following her. The aliens on those ships came from dozens of different species, some that humans had never seen before. There were squid-like beings from the methane worlds, crystalline entities from the gas giants, and machine intelligences from the asteroid belts. We can't house all of them, her station commander protested. We don't have the resources. Then we'll expand our resources, Somin replied. We'll convert cargo bays and empty labs. We'll share our food and air and water. We'll make it work. Why should we risk our own survival for aliens who aren't even our allies? Somin looked out at the refugee ships floating near their station. She could see lights in their windows. Families huddled together, children pressing their faces against the glass to look at the stars, old ones who had lived long lives and now faced extinction. Because somebody has to, she said. Because if we don't help them, who will? Captain Yun Wu was having similar conversations with his crew. His cargo ship was now packed with Nexari drones who moved in confused silence through the corridors. Human crew members had given up their private quarters to house alien refugees. The ship's food processors were working overtime to create nutrition that different species could digest. Captain, his engineer said, the ship's not designed for this many passengers. Our life support systems are already straining. How long? Can we maintain current levels? Maybe 2 weeks if we're lucky. Then we better get to human space fast. Lieutenant Nari was documenting the systematic abandonment of the outer rim when she discovered something that changed everything. On the former Corvani world of Ancient Harbor, she found a partially destroyed data center. Most of the information had been wiped, but her technical specialist managed to recover fragments. Lieutenant, you need to see this. Corporal Sunho called her over to his console. It's a strategic analysis of the devourer threat. The recovered data painted a terrifying picture. The devourers were not just another hostile alien race. They were a machine intelligence from outside the galaxy that had consumed 7 other galaxies over millions of years. They converted matter into energy and energy into more machines. They absorbed the consciousness of every living being they encountered, adding that mental power to their collective intelligence. But here's the interesting part, Sunho continued. According to this analysis, they've never encountered a species like humans before. What makes humans different? Our neural patterns are apparently too chaotic for their absorption technology. Every other species in the galaxy has more organized thought processes. But human consciousness is messy, unpredictable. The analysis suggests the devourers might not be able to consume human minds at all. Nari stared at the data. If this was true, it meant humans were naturally immune to the devourer's primary weapon. But it also meant something else. They knew, she whispered. The galactic races knew humans were immune, and they still abandoned us. Yes, ma'am. They want us to fight the devourers and die doing it. They figure human immunity might slow the enemy down enough for them to escape to other galaxies. Nari closed her eyes. The betrayal was complete. Humanity had not just been abandoned. They had been deliberately positioned as sacrificial pawns in someone else's strategy for survival, but as she looked at the data, she began to see something else. If humans were immune to the devourers, Mind-eating technology, that changed the entire equation. It meant humanity might have a real chance to fight back. "Send all of this data to Colonial Command immediately," she ordered. "Priority Alpha transmission." "Yes, ma'am." "Should I include a message?" Nari thought about the refugee ships Dr. Soman was rescuing, about Captain Hyunwoo risking his ship to save abandoned workers, about all the humans who were choosing to help rather than run. "Tell them we found their weak spot," she said. "And tell them something else. Tell them we're not going to let them down." Admiral Dong-yun stood before the emergency session of the Terran Colonial Senate on New Geneva Station. The great chamber was packed with representatives from every human world, their faces grim in the artificial light. He had never seen the Senate so quiet. "The intelligence reports are confirmed," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The entity approaching our galaxy consumes entire worlds. It has destroyed 7 galaxies over millions of years. The advanced races call it the Devourer." A holographic display showed the enemy's projected path. Red lines traced across the galaxy map, showing how the destruction would spread from the outer rim toward the core worlds. "Current projections show the Devourer fleet will reach our outer colonies in 16 months, Dong-yun continued. "Every inhabited system in human space will be attacked within 2 years. Senator Yunji from the inner world of Proxima Centauri stood up. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Admiral, what are our chances of successfully defending against this threat?" Dong-yun's jaw tightened. "Based on comparative analysis of enemy capabilities versus our current military assets, our chances of victory are less than 1%. Whispers filled the chamber. 1% was not really a chance at all. "Then we must consider evacuation," Senator Yunji said. "We have the transport capacity to move perhaps half our population to the inner systems before the attack begins. We should focus on saving who we can." "Half?" The voice came from the back of the chamber. A young man stood up, his mining colony uniform simple among the formal clothes of the other representatives. "What about the other half?" "Please state your name for the record," the Senate President said. "Jiho. I represent the mining world of Kepler 438c. 30 million people live in our system. Most of them are mining families who have worked the asteroids for generations. We don't have evacuation ships for 30 million people." Senator Yunji's expression softened with what might have been sympathy. "I understand your concern, but we must be realistic. The transport ships exist to save the core population centers. We cannot sacrifice the future of humanity for what?" Jiho's voice grew louder. "For miners? For farmers? For the people? Who actually built the colonies you want to abandon?" Other representatives began to speak at once. The chamber filled with arguments and counter-arguments. Some supported evacuation. Others demanded that every human world be defended. A few suggested surrendering to the Devourers and hoping for mercy. The Senate President called for order. "We will hear from Captain So-young next. She has recently returned from patrol duty in the outer systems." Captain So-young walked to the speaker's platform. She was younger than most of the representatives, but her uniform bore the decorations of the Proxima incident, where she had single-handedly saved a civilian transport from pirates. Her dark eyes swept across the chamber before she began to speak. "Senators, I have seen what our so-called allies did when they learned about the Devourer threat. They ran. They abandoned their own people to buy themselves time. They sealed away their technology so we couldn't use it to defend ourselves." She paused, her voice growing stronger. I have also seen what humans did. Dr. Soman rescued alien refugees that their own governments left to die. Captain Hyunwoo risked his ship to save workers abandoned by their hive queens. Lieutenant Nari gathered intelligence that might save us all, even after discovering that we were meant to be sacrificial pawns. The chamber was quiet now, everyone listening. The galaxy turned its back on us, So-young continued. Our supposed allies fell silent when courage was needed. But we are human. We have never been good at knowing when to quit. She looked directly at Senator Yoonji. You suggest we do what the advanced races did, run away, save the lucky few, and abandon the rest. But that's not who we are. We are the species that sailed across unknown oceans to find new lands. We are the people who reached for the stars when everyone said it was impossible. Her voice rose to fill the entire chamber. If this is where we make our stand, then we answer with fire. We fight for every world, every station, every family that calls human space their home. We show this galaxy what it means to face humans who have nowhere left to run. The silence that followed was complete. Then Jiho began to clap. Other representatives joined him. Within moments, the entire chamber was applauding. Senator Yoonji stood again. Captain, your words are inspiring, but inspiration doesn't stop planet-killing machines. How do you propose we fight an enemy that destroyed 7 galaxies? Admiral Dong-yoon stepped forward. We received new intelligence from Lieutenant Nari's mission. The Devourers consume the consciousness of their victims. But there's evidence that human neural patterns are too chaotic for their absorption technology. We might be naturally immune to their primary weapon. Might be? The data is incomplete, but it's the best hope we have. Senator Kwang-soo from the agricultural world of Kepler 452b stood up. He was a practical man who usually stayed quiet during Senate debates. Admiral, if we decide to fight, what would you need? Dong-yun activated another holographic display. This one showed production charts and resource allocation plans. We would need to convert our entire industrial capacity to military production. Every shipyard, every factory, every mining operation would focus on building weapons and ships. What kind of ships? Everything. We'll turn cargo haulers into missile platforms. We'll arm mining vessels with fusion warheads. We'll convert civilian craft into fighters. It won't be pretty, but it might work. Senator Yoonji shook her head. You're talking about militarizing our entire civilization. What happens to our economy, our trade, our way of life? Captain So-young answered. What happens to our way of life if we're all dead? Young Jiho stood again. The mining guilds will support full military conversion. Our asteroid facilities can be turned into weapons platforms. Our fusion reactors can power planetary defense systems. Other representatives began to voice their support. The agricultural worlds offered to feed refugee populations. The research colonies promised to share their scientific knowledge. Even the inner worlds agreed to open their facilities to Outer Rim evacuees. But the real moment came when Dr. Hae-yoon, the chief scientist studying Devourer technology, entered the chamber. She was out of breath from running, her lab coat still stained with chemicals. Senators, she announced, we've had a breakthrough. Analysis of the Devourer quantum signatures confirms it. They cannot process human consciousness. We are immune to their mind absorption weapons. The chamber erupted in excited conversation. This changed everything. But there's more, Dr. Hayen continued. Their technology is designed around predictable, organized thought patterns. Human consciousness is chaotic, creative, unpredictable. It might actually disrupt their systems if they try to absorb us. Admiral Dong-yun smiled for the first time. in weeks. Doctor, are you saying humans could be a weapon against them? I'm saying we might be their worst nightmare. The Senate President called for a formal vote. The question before us is simple. Do we evacuate and abandon the outer colonies? Or do we stay and fight for every human world? The vote was not even close. Every representative voted to fight. Even Senator Yoonji, in the end, cast her vote for resistance. As the session ended, representatives gathered in small groups to discuss the challenges ahead. The mining worlds would need to retool their equipment. The agricultural colonies would have to feed millions of refugees. The research stations would work around the clock to develop new weapons. Captain So-young found herself surrounded by younger officers asking questions about tactics and strategy. She looked at their eager faces and felt a moment of doubt. These people were trusting her words, but she knew how terrible the odds really were. Ji-ho approached her as the chamber emptied. Captain, do you really think we can win? So-young considered lying, but decided he deserved the truth. I think we can make them pay such a high price for every system that they'll think twice about attacking the next galaxy. Is that enough? She looked out through the station's windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere in that darkness, an enemy was coming that had never been stopped. But somewhere else in that same darkness were human colonists who were depending on her to keep them safe. It has to be, she said, because the alternative is letting them win without a fight. As the representatives returned to their ships to carry word back to their worlds, one thing was clear. Humanity had made its choice. They would not run. They would not surrender. They would not abandon their own people to save themselves. If the Devourers wanted human space, they would have to fight for every meter of it. Chief Engineer Woo Jin looked at the massive industrial complex spread out before him. 6 months ago, this had been the Titan shipyards, building cargo vessels and passenger transports. Now it was the heart of Project Prometheus, humanity's desperate attempt to build a war fleet in less than a year. Show me the conversion statistics, he said to his assistant, a brilliant young engineer named K-Wan. She pulled up the holographic displays. We've converted 73 cargo haulers into missile platforms. 48 mining ships are now equipped with kinetic penetrators. The passenger liners have been turned into troop transports with basic armor plating. Woo Jin nodded, but his expression remained troubled. It's not enough. We're putting combat systems on civilian hulls. These ships weren't designed for war. They're better than nothing, Chaewon replied. And the volunteer crews are training hard. Captain Kyung-soo's people are teaching basic combat tactics to merchant marine officers. Through the shipyards, windows, Woo Jin could see the organized chaos of the conversion project. Welding sparks lit up the darkness as workers installed weapon systems on ships that had never been meant to fight. It was improvised, desperate, and probably doomed to failure. But it was also the most incredible thing he had ever seen. In another section of the shipyards, Dr. Haeun was working on the project that might make the difference between victory and total defeat. Her laboratory was filled with captured Devourer technology, fragments recovered from their scouts that had been probing the galaxy's edge. The quantum resonance patterns are definitely incompatible with human neural architecture, she explained to her research team. But I think we can turn that incompatibility into a weapon. Her colleague, Dr. Jung-soo, looked skeptical. You want to weaponize human consciousness? Not exactly. I want to create a feedback loop. When the Devourers try to absorb human minds, their systems will encounter patterns they can't process. If we can amplify that effect, we might be able to overload their absorption technology. She pointed to a complex device on her workbench. It looked like a cross between a radio transmitter and a medical scanner. This neural amplifier can broadcast human thought patterns across subspace frequencies. If we install them on our ships, they might disrupt devourer systems just by being near them. Dr. Jungsu picked up the device carefully. This could work, but the power requirements are enormous. That's where the fusion cores come in. Every ship will need its own miniature star to power these systems. Meanwhile, across human space, ordinary citizens were transforming themselves into warriors. Kyung-soo had been a crime boss on the mining world of Ceres before the war began. Now he was training factory workers and farmers to fight in space. "Listen up," he told a group of new recruits in the converted cargo bay of a transport ship. "You're not soldiers. You're not pilots. You're ordinary people who volunteered to do something extraordinary." The recruits came from every human world. There was Min-hee, a teacher from an agricultural colony who now piloted a converted school transport loaded with missiles. Seung-won was a factory supervisor who commanded a mining platform equipped with industrial lasers. Young-min had been studying art before the war. Now he operated the targeting systems on a weaponized cargo hauler. "The enemy has better technology," Kyung-soo continued. "They have ships that can bend space and weapons that can crack planets. But they've never fought humans before. They don't understand what we're capable of when we have nothing left to lose." He activated a holographic display showing battle tactics adapted for civilian ships. "We can't match their firepower, so we don't try to. We swarm them. We use our numbers. We make every shot count, and we never, ever give up." Min-hee raised her hand. "What if we lose? What if they break through our defenses?" Kyung-soo's expression grew hard. "Then we make sure they pay such a high price that they remember humans for the rest of their existence. We show them that conquering human space is possible, but it's not worth the cost." In the outer rim, defensive preparations were taking shape on a dozen worlds. On the mining planet, Kepler 438c Jiho was overseeing the conversion of asteroid mining facilities into orbital weapon platforms. The same mass drivers that had been used to launch ore shipments were now capable of firing tungsten projectiles at near-light speed. "The math works," he explained to the mining guild representatives. "A 10-kilogram projectile moving at 30% of light speed hits with the force of a nuclear weapon, and we have thousands of mass drivers across the asteroid belt." The guild leader, an old woman named In-suk, looked worried. "What about the miners working on those asteroids? If we turn their homes into weapons, where will they live?" "Underground. We're converting the mining tunnels into bunkers. If the surface defenses fail, we can continue the fight from below." It was a desperate plan, but it was their only option. Every human world was adapting its infrastructure for war. Agricultural planets converted their orbital elevators into missile launch systems. Research stations turned their particle accelerators into energy weapons. Even the luxury resorts of the inner worlds were being converted into refugee centers and military hospitals. Dr. Haeun made her breakthrough on a cold Tuesday morning in the Titan shipyards. She had been working for 36 hours straight, running tests on her neural amplifier, when she noticed something strange in the data. "Chaewon, come look at this," she called to Woo Jin's assistant, who had been helping with the technical integration. The younger woman hurried over. "What is it?" "The amplifier doesn't just disrupt devourer absorption technology, it actually reverses the process." Haeun's eyes were bright with excitement and exhaustion. When a human consciousness encounters their systems, it doesn't just resist absorption, it starts absorbing them. You mean humans can consume devourer minds? Not minds exactly. They're machines. But we can absorb their processing power, their memory cores, their tactical databases. We can turn their own technology against them. The implications were staggering. Instead of being victims, humans could become predators of the devourer's artificial consciousness. But it would require incredible risks. There's a catch, Dr. Hayon continued. The process requires direct mental contact. A human would have to connect their mind to a devourer system while the amplifier is active. That sounds dangerous. It could kill the person attempting it, or drive them insane, or both. But when word of the discovery spread, volunteers came forward immediately. Captain Soyoung was the first to sign up, followed by dozens of other military officers. Even civilian pilots like Min-hee volunteered for the Neural Amplifier program. As the months passed, the transformation of human civilization became complete. Every aspect of life was focused on the coming war. Children learned mathematics by calculating missile trajectories. Artists created propaganda posters encouraging people to volunteer for dangerous missions. Musicians wrote songs about the heroism of cargo haulers turned warships. Chief Engineer Woo Jin stood on the observation deck of Titan shipyards, watching the final preparations. In the construction bays below, the last converted civilian ships were receiving their weapons systems. In a few weeks, this makeshift fleet would face an enemy that had conquered 7 galaxies. Do you think it will be enough? Chaewon asked, joining him at the window. Woo Jin looked at the ships taking shape below. They were ugly, improvised, cobbled together from spare parts and desperate innovation. They would be facing sleek, alien war machines powered by technology humanity barely understood. No, he said honestly, it won't be enough to win. Then why are we doing this? He pointed to a converted school transport where children from an evacuation convoy were painting messages on the hull. Because those kids deserve a chance to grow up. Because every family in human space deserves to know that someone fought for them. Because maybe, just maybe, we'll hurt them badly enough that the next galaxy will have a better chance. Chaewon nodded. And if we can't win? Then we make sure the devourers learn something they've never had to learn before. Woo Jin's voice was quiet but determined. We teach them what it costs to make humans desperate. In the months that followed, the desperate preparations continued. The neural amplifier technology was installed on key ships. Volunteer crews trained for suicide missions against devourer command vessels. Children and non-combatants were evacuated to the most protected worlds. And through it all, one message was broadcast to every human in the galaxy. The enemy expects us to run or surrender. They expect us to abandon our own people to save ourselves. But we are human. We don't leave anyone behind. We don't surrender what we've built. And when they come for our homes, our families, and our future, we'll be ready. The fleet was not perfect. The weapons were improvised. The tactics were untested. But for the first time since the crisis began, humanity had something they hadn't possessed before. They had hope. Commander Jamin stood on the bridge of the destroyer Incheon, watching the edge of the Tau Ceti system through the main display. His ship was humanity's furthest early warning post, positioned to give the colonies as much advance notice as possible. When the enemy arrived, "Sensor contact," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Hieri. "Multiple hyperspace signatures emerging at the system's edge." Yamin felt his heart begin to race. After months of preparation, the moment had finally come. How many ships? Sensors are having trouble getting accurate readings. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Hieri paused, studying her instruments more carefully. At least 50 contacts, sir. Possibly more. The main display shifted to show the incoming vessels. What Jamin saw made his blood run cold. The enemy ships were enormous, easily 10 times the size of human destroyers. Their hulls seemed to absorb light, creating dark voids against the stars. Strange patterns of energy pulsed along their surfaces like the beating of alien hearts. Send the warning signal to all human colonies, Jamin ordered. Priority Alpha emergency transmission. Tell them the Devourers have arrived. The enemy fleet moved through the system with frightening purpose. They ignored the outer planets and asteroid fields, heading directly for Tau Ceti Prime, a mining world with 2 million human colonists. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead enemy vessel, reported Communications Officer Subin. Let's hear it. The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything human ears had ever heard. It was a chorus of mechanical sounds blended with something that might have been organic. When the translation system processed it, the words were simple and terrifying. Biological entities of this system, you will cease resistance. Your consciousness will be incorporated. Your matter will be converted. Compliance ensures minimal suffering. Jamin looked around his bridge crew. These were young officers, most of them barely out of the academy. They had never seen real combat. But their eyes showed determination rather than fear. Reply on all frequencies, he said. This is Commander Jamin of the Human Colonial Navy. You are not welcome in our space. Leave now, or we will be forced to defend ourselves. The response came immediately, and this time there was something like amusement in the alien voice. Resistance is noted. Your species will serve as an interesting study in futile defiance. Sir, Lieutenant Hieri called out, they're beginning their attack run on Tau Ceti Prime. Jamin made the decision that would define humanity's first engagement with the Devourers. All ships, attack formation. We're going in. The human task force consisted of 12 vessels, 3 destroyers, 4 converted cargo haulers, and 5 mining ships equipped with makeshift weapons. Against the massive Devourer fleet, they looked like insects attacking giants. Target the lead ship, Jamin ordered. All weapons, fire when ready. The Incheon's missile tubes opened, launching a spread of nuclear warheads at the nearest Devourer vessel. The other human ships followed suit, filling space with kinetic projectiles and fusion explosives. The weapons struck the alien hull and simply disappeared. The dark surface absorbed the nuclear fire like a sponge soaking up water. The kinetic rounds vanished into what looked like solid metal. No effect, sir, Hieri reported. Their hull seems to be absorbing our attacks. The Devourer ship responded with a beam of purple energy that struck the converted hauler Busan. The human ship's armor plating began to glow, then melt, then disappear entirely. In seconds, there was nothing left but empty space. Evasive maneuvers, Jamin ordered. Keep moving. Don't let them lock onto us. But the enemy weapons were unlike anything humans had faced. Instead of targeting the ships themselves, they seemed to target the space around them. Where the purple beams touched, reality itself began to unravel. The mining ship Daejeon tried to ram one of the smaller Devourer vessels. The human ship struck the alien hull at full speed and passed right through it, as if the enemy were made of shadow rather than matter. They're not entirely real, observed Science Officer Mink-Young. Their ships exist in some kind of dimensional phase that lets them selectively interact with matter. Can we match that phase? Not with our technology. But, sir, I'm detecting something else. The neural amplifiers Dr. Hayen installed, they're having an effect. The Devourer ships are moving away from any human vessel equipped with the amplifiers. Jamin realized what this meant. They're afraid of us. Order all ships with neural amplifiers to close distance. Let's see what happens when we get close enough to touch them. The destroyer Soul, equipped with one of the prototype amplifiers, accelerated toward the largest Devourer vessel. As it approached, the alien ship began to solidify, becoming more real and more vulnerable. Dayon, are you reading this? Jamin called to the Soul's captain. Captain Dayon's voice came through the comm system, tense with concentration. The amplifier is working, sir. I can feel something trying to get into my mind, but it can't process human thought patterns. It's like trying to download chaos. Can you maintain contact? I think so. But, sir, something strange is happening. I'm starting to understand their systems. I can see their ship's layout, their weapon configurations, their power distribution. The Soul fired its main guns at point-blank range. This time, the weapons had effect. The Devourer ship's dark hull cracked, revealing pulsing energy conduits beneath. But the victory was short-lived. The alien fleet began to adapt, modifying their phase variants to avoid the neural amplifier effects. More importantly, they changed tactics. Instead of trying to absorb human consciousness, they began using conventional weapons. The destroyer Guangzhou disappeared in a flash of white light when a Devourer energy weapon overloaded its fusion reactor. The converted cargo hauler Ulsan broke, apart under kinetic bombardment from alien projectile weapons. Sir, we've lost 7 ships, Lieutenant Hieri reported. Remaining vessels are requesting permission to withdraw. Jamin looked at the tactical display. His small fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to have unlimited resources and adaptability. But they had accomplished something important. Attention all human vessels, he broadcast on emergency frequencies. The neural amplifiers work. When we get close enough, we can hurt them. We can make them solid, vulnerable. Pass this information to Colonial Command immediately. The mining ship Pohang, its hull scarred and its engines failing, managed to ram a Devourer vessel while its neural amplifier was active. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 systems away, creating a brief new star in the darkness. As the battle turned against the humans, Jamin made his final decision. Set course for the largest enemy ship. Emergency burn, full power. To the neural amplifier. Sir, that's a suicide run. Yes, it is. But maybe we can learn something that will help the next fight. The Incheon accelerated toward the massive Devourer command ship, its neural amplifier broadcasting human consciousness patterns at maximum power. As they approached, Jamin began to experience something impossible. He could see the alien ship from the inside. He could understand its purpose, its history, its terrible mission. The Devourers were not just conquerors, they were fleeing something even worse in the space between galaxies. They consumed consciousness because they needed it to fuel their escape. But most importantly, he learned that they had never encountered resistance like this before. Every species they had conquered had been absorbed or destroyed quickly. Humans were the first to fight back in a way that actually hurt them. Broadcasting final message to all human forces, Jamin said as his ship approached ramming distance. The enemy can be beaten. They're not invincible. They're scared of us because we're something they've never seen before. Use the amplifiers. Get close. Make them pay for every system. The Incheon struck the Devourer command ship while its neural amplifier was at full power. The explosion was unlike anything seen in the war so far. Where the human consciousness met the alien technology, reality twisted and bent, The command ship didn't just explode, it seemed to turn inside out, releasing energies that shouldn't exist. Captain Sunwoo, commanding the surviving human vessels, watched the destruction from a safe distance. Only 3 human ships had escaped the battle, but they carried information that would change everything. "Send priority message to Colonial Command," he ordered. "First engagement with Devourer forces complete. Enemy casualties: 1 command ship, significant damage to 6 smaller vessels. Our casualties: 9 ships, all hands." He paused, looking at the debris field where his friends had died. "But we learned something important today. They can bleed, they can die, and when they try to consume human minds, they get more than they bargained for." The message that reached human space was simple but revolutionary. The Devourers were not invincible. They could be hurt, confused, and even destroyed by human tactics. The neural amplifier technology worked, but it required courage and sacrifice to use effectively. More importantly, humanity had sent a message to an enemy that had conquered 7 galaxies without serious opposition. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers had encountered a species that fought back hard enough to make them reconsider their approach. Admiral Minsock looked tired as he studied the strategic display in the Colonial Command Center. 8 months of constant fighting had aged him beyond his 30 years. Red markers showed the systems humanity had lost. Blue markers showed where they still held the line. The pattern told a story of desperate resistance and costly victories. "Report on the Kepler 442 defense," he said to his aide, Commander Bitna. "The system held for 6 weeks before falling," she replied. Captain Jiwon's forces destroyed 12 Devourer ships before being overwhelmed. Most of the civilian population was evacuated. Minsock nodded grimly. Every battle followed the same pattern. Human forces would fight until they were almost completely destroyed, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy before retreating to the next defensive line. It was working, but barely. "What about the Vega sector?" "Admiral Yuna is still holding the agricultural worlds there. She's adapted mining equipment into mobile defense platforms. The Devourers have tried to break through 4 times, but she keeps pushing them back." The war had changed both sides. The Devourers, accustomed to quick victories, found themselves trapped in a grinding conflict of attrition. Human forces, equipped with neural amplifiers and desperate courage, made every system cost more than it was worth. On the agricultural world of Gliesa 581G, Admiral Yuna supervised the defense from a converted farm tractor that had been fitted with missile launchers and energy shields. Around her, farmers drove their own weaponized equipment against alien invaders that had destroyed 7 galaxies. "Harvester Squad 7, target the phased cruiser on your left," she commanded over the radio. "Remember, get close enough for the neural amplifiers to force them into normal space, then hit them with everything." The battle looked like nothing in military history. Grain harvesters fired guided missiles while irrigation systems launched electrified water at enemy forces. Greenhouse complexes had been converted into hardened bunkers where children and elderly civilians helped reload ammunition. Jaewon, a farmer who had never left his home planet before the war, piloted his converted fertilizer spreader directly into the path of a Devourer ground unit. The neural amplifier mounted on his vehicle forced the alien machines to become solid just as his improvised explosives detonated. "Another one down," he reported calmly, as if he were discussing crop yields instead of destroying reality-bending war machines. The Devourers adapted to human tactics, but humans adapted faster. When the aliens learned to avoid neural amplifier, Fields humans began using the amplifiers as mines hidden in space debris and asteroid fields. When the Devourers started using conventional weapons to avoid mental contact, humans used their superior knowledge of guerrilla warfare to make every engagement costly. On the mining world of Kepler 400 feet 2b, the defense took a different form. The planet's population had retreated to the vast underground tunnel systems left by decades of resource extraction. What the Devourers found on the surface was an empty world with no apparent military value. But Controller Sung-Ho directing the underground. Resistance had turned the entire planet into a trap. "Activate mining charges in sectors 7 through 12, he ordered his team of volunteers. Throughout the tunnel system, massive explosions shook the ground. Above, Devourer ground forces found themselves falling into carefully prepared pit traps filled with industrial acids and fusion bombs. The planet's surface began to collapse in calculated ways, creating sinkholes that swallowed enemy units. "They want to consume our world?" Sung-Ho said to his communications officer. "Let them choke on it." The psychological effect on the Devourers was becoming clear. For millions of years, they had been the hunters, the unstoppable force that consumed galaxies. Now they found themselves trapped in an increasingly expensive war against a species that refused to follow the established patterns of conquest and absorption. Captain Hyun-woo, now commanding a flotilla of refugee ships and converted civilian vessels, intercepted enemy communications that revealed the strain. His linguistics officer, a former university professor named Soyeon, had learned to decode Devourer transmissions. "They're calling us the Chaos Plague," she reported. "Their command structure is having difficulty processing the concept of a species that gets stronger when threatened instead of weaker." Hyun-woo smiled grimly. His ship, the modified cargo hauler Incheon's Pride, carried refugees from a dozen different species, all of them learning human tactics and adapting them to their own abilities. The hive mind workers they had rescued were developing individual consciousness. The crystalline beings were learning to think in unpredictable patterns. "Broadcast on all frequencies," he ordered. "Any Devourer units listening, this is Captain Hyun-woo of the Human Refugee Fleet. You came to our galaxy expecting to find organized, predictable civilizations you could easily consume. Instead, you found us. We're turning your own victims into copies of ourselves. How does that feel?" The response came in the form of a massive attack on his position. But Hyun-woo was ready. His refugee ships scattered like a flock of birds, regrouping behind asteroids and debris fields. When the Devourers pursued, they found themselves facing not just human weapons, but alien refugees who had learned human stubbornness. Meanwhile, in the core systems of the galaxy, the advanced races were beginning to reconsider their strategy. The crystalline Veltar sent encrypted messages to human command, offering limited technical assistance. The ancient Corvani dispatched a small observation fleet to monitor the fighting, but Prime Minister Ji-hoon, now Earth's senior leader, rejected their overtures with cold anger. He met their ambassadors in a simple conference room rather than the grand diplomatic halls they expected. "For 300 years we tried to earn your acceptance," he said to the assembled alien representatives. "We followed your rules, paid your taxes, served on your worlds. When you needed nothing from us, we were too primitive for your company." The Veltar ambassador, a crystalline entity that communicated through light patterns, attempted to explain their position. The threat was beyond calculation. Evacuation was the only logical choice. "Logical for you," Ji-hoon replied. "But you didn't just evacuate. You sealed away your technology so we couldn't use it to defend ourselves. You wrote off entire sectors full of civilians as acceptable losses. You abandoned your own people because saving them was inconvenient. The Corvani representative, an ancient being that had lived for millennia, tried a different approach. Young species, your resistance has proven effective. We offer our support in the continuing conflict. Now that you need us to bleed for you, we're suddenly valuable, Ji-hoon said. We remember who stood with us in the dark. We remember who chose to save themselves and leave others to die. He stood, indicating the meeting was over. Win this war yourselves, or lose it yourselves. But don't expect humans to die for people who wouldn't lift a finger to help us when our children were threatened. The Ryson alien representatives left in confusion. They had never encountered a species that refused powerful allies out of principle rather than pragmatism. But the war was taking its toll on humanity as well. Every victory came at a terrible price. Entire colonies had been evacuated or destroyed. Families were scattered across human space. Young people who should have been studying art or science were learning to fight machines that consumed consciousness. Dr. Hyun, now working around the clock to improve the neural amplifier technology, collapsed at her workstation after 60 hours of continuous research. Her assistant, Dr. Jung-soo, found her unconscious among her notes and calculations. The amplifiers are working too well, she mumbled as he helped her to a medical bay. Every time we use them, we're learning more about how the Devourers think. But we're also becoming more like them, more machine-like in our own thinking. What, do you mean? The volunteers who use the amplifiers are changing. They're still human, but they're starting to process information like artificial intelligences. They're becoming more efficient, more logical, less emotional. It was a disturbing revelation. Humanity's greatest weapon against the Devourers might be transforming them into something similar to their enemies. But in the outer rim systems where the fighting was fiercest, soldiers like Captain Dayan were discovering something else about the neural amplifiers. Each time they used the technology to interface with Devourer systems, they learned not just about alien capabilities, but about the terrible history that had driven the Devourers across the universe. They're refugees, too, Dayon reported after a successful engagement where her amplifier had allowed her to completely take control of a Devourer ship. They're running from something in the space between galaxies, something that makes them look like peaceful explorers by comparison. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers were fleeing from an even worse threat, then stopping them might only delay the arrival of something far more dangerous. Admiral Min-seok studied this new intelligence with growing concern. Are you saying there's something worse than reality-eating machines out there? I'm saying the Devourers are terrified of it, Dayon replied. Whatever they're running from, it's been chasing them for millions of years across multiple galaxies. And if we stop them here, we might be next. Admiral Dong-yun floated in the zero-gravity command center of the massive space station orbiting Kepler 452b. Around him, holographic displays showed the greatest military operation in human history. For 6 months, his engineering teams had been preparing what they called the System Killer, a trap so large it would use an entire star system as a weapon. Final status report, he said to Chief Engineer Woo Jin, who looked exhausted after months of preparation. All 4 gas giants have been hollowed out and filled with antimatter, Woo Jin replied. The fusion reactors are at full power. The gravitational lenses are aligned. We're ready to turn this solar system into the biggest bomb ever created. Through the station windows, Dong-yun could see the evidence of their work. Where gas giants had once orbited peacefully, there were now artificial structures the size of moons, all connected by energy conduits that pulsed with barely contained power. The entire system had become a weapon. The Devourer fleet is approaching. Right on schedule, reported Intelligence Officer Suk-young. Our retreating forces have led them exactly where we wanted them. The plan was insane, desperate, and typically human. For months, Admiral Yuna's forces had been conducting a fighting retreat, making the Devourers believe they were pursuing the remnants of human military power toward a final, decisive battle. In reality, they were being herded into the most elaborate trap ever constructed. Captain So-young, commanding the bait fleet, transmitted from her position near the system's edge. Devourer main force has taken the bait. They're coming in fast, probably thinking they can finish off human resistance in one decisive engagement. How many ships? Dong-yun asked. Our sensors count over 300 vessels, including their primary consciousness processing facility, that massive world ship that serves as their command center. Dong-yun smiled grimly. That world ship was their main target. Intelligence suggested it contained the collective consciousness of billions of absorbed beings, all processed into computational power for the Devourer fleet. Destroying it would cripple their entire command structure. All human forces, begin final withdrawal, he ordered. Lead them into the kill zone. Captain So-young's fleet, scarred and battered from months of fighting, limped deeper into the Kepler 452 system. Behind them came the Devourer fleet, their dark ships eager to finish what they saw as the last remnants of human resistance. The aliens had learned caution during the long war, but they had also grown frustrated. Each system they conquered cost them more resources than they gained. Their traditional tactics of quick absorption and conversion had failed against human unpredictability. They wanted this war finished. Enemy fleet entering the primary kill zone, reported Tactical Officer Mina. Dong-yun looked at the display showing hundreds of enemy ships surrounding the modified gas giants. The Devourers were so focused on pursuing the human fleet that they hadn't noticed what the planets had become. Tae-hyun, are you ready? Dong-yun asked the former asteroid miner who had volunteered for the most dangerous job in human history. From deep within the core of the first modified gas giant, Tae-hyun's voice came through the communicator. Antimatter charges are armed and ready. Just give me the word, Admiral. Tae-hyun had volunteered to pilot the detonation sequence manually, ensuring that the chain reaction would spread from one modified planet to another at exactly the right moment. It was a suicide mission, but he had insisted on doing it personally. Remember, we only get one chance at this, Dong-yun said. The timing has to be perfect. Understood, sir. I've been mining asteroids for 20 years. I know how to make things explode. The Devourer fleet moved deeper into the system, their attention focused on the retreating human ships. Their sensors, designed to detect consciousness and life energy, completely missed the artificial nature of the planets around them. Enemy command ship has entered optimal position, reported Suk-young. The massive world ship floated between two of the modified gas giants, exactly where the gravitational calculations had predicted it would be. Around it, smaller Devourer vessels formed protective formations, all of them positioned perfectly for maximum destruction. Execute system killer, Dong-yun ordered. Deep within the core of the first gas giant, Tae-hyun activated the sequence he had spent months perfecting. For Earth, he whispered as he pressed the detonation controls. For every world you destroyed, for every mind you consumed. The explosion began as a bright point of light that grew brighter than the system's star. The antimatter annihilated, matter on a scale never before attempted, releasing energies that twisted space and time. The chain reaction spread from the first planet to the second, then the third, then the fourth. What followed was the most massive artificial explosion in galactic history. 4 gas giants worth of antimatter detonated simultaneously, their energy focused by gravitational lenses toward the center of the system where the Devourer fleet waited. The effect was devastating beyond calculation. Devourer ships that had survived the destruction of entire galaxies simply ceased to exist, their exotic matter unable to withstand the focused fury of 4 miniature supernovas. The dark hulls that had absorbed human weapons for months cracked and shattered under energies that made fusion bombs look like firecrackers. But the most important target was the massive command ship. As the wave of destruction reached it, the world ship's defenses activated, creating barriers of twisted space-time around its hull. For a moment it seemed like it might survive. Then Captain So-Young made her own desperate choice. Her destroyer Soul, equipped with the most powerful neural amplifier ever built, accelerated directly toward the command ship as the antimatter explosions raged around them. "This is Captain So-Young to all human forces," she transmitted as her ship approached ramming distance. "The neural amplifier is affecting their command ship. I can see inside their system, understand their structure. They're not just a ship, they're a processing center for consciousness itself." Her neural amplifier, powered by the energy of the antimatter explosions, forced the alien command ship into normal space just as the focused explosion reached it. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourer collective consciousness experienced something it had never felt before: pain. The command ship didn't just explode, it screamed. The sound was not heard through space, but felt through the quantum foam itself, as billions of absorbed consciousnesses were suddenly released from their digital prison. For a brief moment, the ghosts of 7 consumed galaxies flickered into existence around the dying ship. From his command station, Admiral Dong-Yun watched as 70% of the Devourer fleet simply vanished in the antimatter inferno. Those ships that survived were damaged and confused, their connection to their primary intelligence severed. "Suk-Young, what's the status of surviving enemy forces?" "They're retreating, sir." "No, not retreating, fleeing. They're running for the Galactic Edge as fast as their damaged ships can carry them." The victory was complete, but the cost was enormous. An entire star system had been sacrificed to create the weapon. Tai-hyun and thousands of other volunteers had died in the explosion. Captain So-Young's ship had vanished in the command ship's destruction. But for the first time since the war began, the Devourers were running scared. Admiral So-Hee, commanding the human counterattack fleet, pursued the fleeing aliens to the edge of the system. As her ships approached the damaged survivors, she opened a communication channel that was broadcast across the entire galaxy. "This is Admiral So-Hee of the Human Colonial Navy," she announced. "To any Devourer forces still listening, understand. What just happened here? You came to our galaxy expecting to find easy prey. You thought you could consume us like you consume 7 other galaxies." The transmission reached not just the fleeing Devourers, but every listening station in the galaxy. The advanced races who had abandoned the Outer Rim heard it in their fortified core worlds. The refugee populations hiding in human space heard it in their temporary shelters. Instead, you found something you had never encountered before. So-Hee continued. You found a species that gets more dangerous when threatened, not less. You found people who will sacrifice an entire star system to protect their children. You found humans. As the surviving Devourer ships fled toward the galaxy's edge, their communications were chaotic with panic and confusion. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered a prey species that could hurt them more than they could hurt it. This is what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness, so he broadcast to the galaxy. For 300 years, we tried to earn your acceptance through peaceful cooperation. You responded by abandoning us when we needed help. You thought we would die quietly and buy you time to escape. The tide of the war had turned. The Devourers, their command structure shattered and their expansion halted, began a fighting retreat toward the space between galaxies. But they left behind something they had never left before, a galactic civilization that had learned they could be beaten. To the advanced races hiding in your core worlds, so he continued, we fought your war for you. We bled and died to stop. An enemy you were too frightened to face. Remember that when you tried to return to the systems we defended. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 452b, Admiral Soyoung stood in the Great Assembly Hall of the Reformed Galactic Council. She was alive, though scarred from her desperate ramming attack on the Devourer command ship. Her survival had been a miracle. Her ship had been caught in a temporal distortion when the alien consciousness processing center exploded, throwing her through space and time before depositing her, unconscious but alive, near a human rescue ship. Now she faced the representatives of every major galactic civilization, the same beings who had abandoned humanity to face the Devourers alone were now extending formal apologies and offers of alliance. The crystalline Veltar ambassador spoke first, its light patterns carefully modulated to show respect and humility. Admiral Soyoung, the Veltar Collective wishes to express our gratitude for humanity's heroic defense of the galaxy. We offer full technological exchange and military cooperation for future threats. The ancient Corvani representative, a being so old its world ship was older than human civilization, added its voice. Young species, your victory has shown us the value of courage over calculation. We offer our ancient knowledge and vast resources to strengthen our mutual defense. One by one, the species that had fled when courage was needed now returned to offer partnership. They spoke of mutual cooperation and shared destiny, of the lessons they had learned from humanity's example. Soyoung listened to their speeches with cold amusement. Her uniform bore decorations from a dozen desperate battles, and her eyes held the memory of too many friends who had died while these people hid in safety. You offer us partnership now, she said when they finished their presentations. But we learned something important in the dark months when we stood alone. We don't need your approval anymore. The hall fell silent. The galactic representatives had expected gratitude, perhaps even humble acceptance of their generous offers. We don't need your advanced technology or your ancient wisdom, Soyoung continued. We have something you've forgotten. The ability to look at impossible odds and choose to fight anyway. The Nexari Hive Queen, speaking through her drone representatives, attempted to explain their position. Admiral, the strategic calculations were clear. The Devourer threat exceeded all defensive capabilities. Evacuation was the only logical response. Logical for you, Soyoung replied, but logic without courage is just elaborate cowardice. You had the power to fight, but not the will. We had the will to fight, but not the power. Guess which one mattered more in the end? She gestured to the viewing screens showing the galaxy beyond the station. Look out there. Every system you abandoned is being rebuilt. Every world you wrote off as a loss is being resettled. Not by your people, but by the refugees you left behind and the humans who refused to let them die. On Earth, President Minji was addressing the human assembly with news of their species' new doctrine. The chamber was packed with representatives from every human world, their faces showing the quiet pride of people who had survived the impossible. "The galaxy is watching us now," Minji said. "They want to know what humanity will do with the respect we've earned through blood and sacrifice. Some expect us to become conquerors, to use our victory to dominate the species that abandoned us." She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. Many of them were young people who had grown up during the war, who had learned to fight before they learned to read. "But that's not who we are. We didn't fight the devourers to prove we were stronger than everyone else. We fought them because someone had to, and no one else would." The president activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Human ships were visible throughout the outer rim, not as conquerors, but as protectors and builders. "We will never again trust our survival to others' mercy," Minji announced. "We will be the guardians of those the galaxy abandons. We will answer calls for help that others ignore. And if the darkness comes again, from this galaxy or beyond, we will not ask permission to light our fires." In the outer rim systems, the new reality was already taking shape. Captain Hyunwoo, no longer a simple cargo hauler, commanded the humanitarian vessel Soul's Promise. His ship carried supplies to refugee populations, rebuilding on worlds the elder races had written off as lost. His crew included humans and aliens alike, all united by the experience of being abandoned and then saved. The former hive mind workers had developed individual consciousness during their time in human space. The crystalline beings had learned to think in creative, unpredictable patterns. Even the ancient machine intelligences had discovered something like emotions. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Rigel sector. Unknown attackers are raiding the new colonies there." Hyunwoo didn't hesitate. "Set course for Rigel. Send word to the nearest human patrol ships." His first officer, a former Veltar crystal entity named Brightstone Thinking, asked the question they were all thinking. "Captain, these colonies are not officially under human protection. We have no legal authority to intervene." "We have the authority of basic decency," Hyunwoo replied, using the same words Captain Jiwon had spoken at the beginning of the war. "If people need help and we can provide it, that's all the authority we need." Back at the Galactic Council Station, Admiral So-young was reaching the end of her address to the assembled representatives. Their faces showed confusion and concern. They had expected humanity to rejoin the galactic community as grateful junior partners, not as an independent force with its own agenda. "Admiral," the Corvani representative said, "surely you understand that galactic stability requires cooperation between all civilized species. Your independence threatens the established order." So-young's expression hardened. The established order failed when it was tested. It produced a galaxy where the strong abandoned the weak, where survival was reserved for those with the best technology and the deepest bunkers. She turned to address the entire assembly. "Humanity is offering you something different. We're not asking to join your club or follow your rules. We're telling you that there's a new power in this galaxy, one that measures strength by how many people you're willing to protect, not how many worlds you control." The Veltar ambassador's light patterns flickered with what might have been anger. "And if we reject your philosophy, if we choose to maintain our traditional approaches to galactic governance, then you do it without our participation," So-young replied simply. "But remember this. When the next threat comes, and there will be a next threat, Ask yourselves who you want standing beside you. The people who ran when things got difficult, or the people who stayed and fought. As the council session ended, the galactic representatives departed in confusion and frustration. They had come expecting to restore the old order with humanity as a grateful client species. Instead, they found themselves facing a fundamental challenge to everything they thought they knew about power and responsibility. Dr. Heian, now leading humanity's Advanced Research Division, was working on projects that would have been impossible before the war. The neural amplifier technology had evolved beyond its original purpose. Instead of just disrupting enemy consciousness absorption systems, it was now being used to enhance human intuition and creativity. The refugees we saved are teaching us things we never imagined, she explained to a group of young scientists. The hive mind workers understand collective decision-making in ways that could revolutionize our government. The crystalline beings think in mathematical patterns that are opening new possibilities in physics. Her research station was unlike anything seen before in the galaxy, a true fusion of different ways of thinking and understanding reality. Human creativity combined with alien logic to produce innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. But the most important changes were happening in the younger generation. Children who had grown up during the war were reaching adulthood with a fundamentally different view of the galaxy than their parents had held. Ji-hoon, now 25 years old, commanded his own patrol ship in the Outer Rim. He had been 17 when the Devourers arrived, barely old enough to fight, but old enough to remember what the galaxy had been like before humanity proved itself. My generation doesn't remember when we were the junior species begging for acceptance, he told his crew as they responded to another distress call. We grew up knowing that courage matters more than technology, that protecting people is more important than following rules. His crew included young humans and aliens who had never known a galaxy where the strong automatically dominated the weak. They took it for granted that help would be given to those who needed it, regardless of species or political affiliation. The changes were spreading beyond the Outer Rim. In the core systems, younger members of the advanced species were beginning to question their elders' decisions during the Devourer crisis. Veltar crystals who had been children during the war were developing chaotic thought patterns similar to human consciousness. Young Corvani were leaving their ancient world ships to explore the galaxy and help with reconstruction efforts. OI.